Hi there, this is a quick spoiler-free lore video, just to celebrate that yes, Daeron Targaryen has finally been confirmed to exist in House of the Dragon. This is spoiler-free if you haven't read the books, that Alicent actually has 4 children in the book. Her 4th and youngest is her son Daeron. And they didn't mention him at all in Season 1, so we were afraid he'd been cut, and now we're happy he's confirmed to be in it. Why haven't they mentioned him before? Well, we've been covering this past 2 years of filming on Season 1. This is a whole series of videos on Where's Daeron. Other channels have been covering this. And the answer both Ryan Condal and George R.R. Martin consistently gave was that, well, in the book, he's not actually in King's Landing during most of these events. He was sent away as a ward to his Hightower cousins in Old Town. Being a ward is comparable to being sent away to university. You know, like how Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon were both wards to Jon Arryn at the Eyrie. And the out-of-universe practical explanation, though, is they didn't know if Season 1 would be a hit and they'd get the full order of all the seasons they wanted. So Daeron's storyline was kind of on the bubble for a while, but direct comparison is how Game of Thrones Season 2 made it a point to carefully word Stannis Baratheon has no sons, to leave open the opportunity for Season 3 to introduce, well, he does have a daughter. Though, like, they never had a scene of Alicent saying, Viserys, I have borne you 3 children. They never gave a definitive number because she actually does have 4. That they wanted to put Daeron in, they just didn't know they have full season order. What's Daeron like? Well, he's about the same age as Jace Velaryon, and he's a young squire. But while he's loyal to his family in general, he largely grew up in the shadow of his older brothers Aegon and Aemond. And ironically, this actually ended up making him a much nicer person. Alicent devoted all of her energy to filling Aegon and Aemond's heads with resentment at Rhaenyra and how they deserve to be on the throne. You are the challenge. We need to get them or they'll get us, like they show in the TV show. Daeron barely spent time with the dysfunctional Alicent Otto Green's family in King's Landing. He spent most of his years growing up with these gallant, chivalrous knights in Old Town. So because he was spared Alicent's needling like that, he doesn't have a massive chip on his shoulder. He's a pretty normal guy. And even the pro-Rhaenyra historians describe him as, they're willing to say, he was courteous and chivalrous. He's everything you'd expect in this young chivalrous knight. His dragon, because he is a dragon rider, his dragon is the young juvenile named Tessarion, the Blue Queen. Just small enough, they said, that he hasn't started riding her yet, but that's because he'll assuredly take his first flight on her to war when he actually shows up in Season 3. So she's just barely young enough to start riding. We'll see that beginning of Season 3, that Tessarion is a juvenile, roughly think like the size that they're showing us Vermax and Moondancer are. He's younger, he's not an adult. The only hint we got that Daeron exists in the TV show, actually, is when Daemon gave an inventory of how many dragons both sides have. And remember at the finale? And he said the Greens have 3 adults. But then at the end of his speech, he said, we have 13 to their 4. Tessarion is the 4th one. We later found out from archived WGA scripts that there were supposed to be lines in episode 7 that were later cut that would have introduced him, set him up. That when Otto first comes back from Old Town to the funeral on Driftmark, Aemond asks, hey, how's my younger brother Daeron doing? Just to introduce that there's another brother we haven't seen yet. That was cut for concision. We get the feeling there were a couple of other things they probably cut for concision, but this relic line that, well, they have 4 dragons, was left in because leaving the door open for Daeron. Now you might be asking, well, why do fans like Daeron so much? Not just, it's a character we thought was cut, but he's actually a pretty popular character. Apart from the fact that he's a Green who's actually nice and chivalrous and a normal person, and honorable, psychologically normal, Daeron is basically the POV character for the reach front of the entire war. So it wouldn't just be cutting him. If you cut him, you're cutting an entire subplot. Notice that in the same scene where Otto first mentions Daeron in Season 2, Episode 2, he goes, I'll go to Old Town and link up with the Hightower army in Daeron. Alicent says, no, go to the Tyrells first. You're more needed there. Go to the Tyrells because their bannermen are wavering. That's crucial. That's set up for Daeron. See, at this point in time, this specific point, the head of House Tyrell is actually just a baby. That his father died, he's just a baby, his mother is a regent who's ruling for him, and their position is precarious, that they're up-jumped stewards. The Targaryens put them in charge only 130 years ago. No one respects the Tyrells. That it wasn't that long ago that they were just the hereditary stewards of Highgarden. So they have this baby lord, mother is regent, and they're wary of joining either side. So ultimately his mother, regent, just declares the Tyrells themselves are neutral. And this leaves individual houses in the Reach to pick different sides. That there's sort of a cultural divide in the Reach between the North and South, comparable to like northern and southern France, because the Reach is inspired by like fantasy France. It's inspired by France, and like France, there's a split between the North and the South. The Hightowers control their main city in the South at Old Town, so they tend to dominate the southern half of the Reach. And that's where all their allies are, like House Redwyne with their big fleet at the island called the Arbor. Turns out Alicent's mother was from House Florent, which makes a lot of sense. But more distant vassals of the Reach in the north resent that the Hightowers think they can just order them all around when you are not our sworn overlords. The Tyrells are. So the distant vassals in the northern Reach resent them. Houses such as the Rowans and the Caswells. Recall the setup they gave back in Season 1, that Lord Caswell was one of the few lords in the capital still loyal to Rhaenyra, and then they hanged him for it? That was set up for this, that will have repercussions, that you can't just hang the Lord Caswell with impunity. He has a family. His son does not take this well. Well, at first, the Northern Reach vassals stay quiet out of fear when they think this is a coup, Rhaenyra is not going to oppose them, there's no chance of anything. But the reason that they're, as Alicent says, wavering now is when word reaches that large sections of Westeros are openly declaring for Rhaenyra. She controls large amounts of territory in a two-side, it's a real civil war here. That the North and the Vale have already openly declared for her, the Velaryons and all their wealth, soon many of the River Lords, that they reconsider just falling in line and eventually will openly declare for Rhaenyra. The Caswells, the Rowans, a couple of others. That's really important because the Caswells' seat is at Bitterbridge. It's called Bitterbridge because there's a lot of battles there. It's a choke point crossing over the Mander River. That's where the highway crosses the Mander, so any big army like the Hightowers that needs to get from Old Town all the way to King's Landing would need to pass through there. So basically the entire northern half of the Reach rebels against the Hightowers, declares for Rhaenyra, and it becomes this separate front of the entire war. And the Hightower army has to fight their way through them. Remember how they were tempting fate? The writers are doing this. You could tell this is foreshadowing. In the Season 2 premiere in the Small Council, when Otto said, the Hightower army is mustering under my nephew Ormond at Old Town. They expect a quick march north to the Riverlands. That they're setting up the tempting fate that, no, the northern half rebels, so the Green armies at Old Town can't link up with the Lannister army in the Riverlands. Because even though the Northern Reach armies are smaller, they can at least prevent them from linking up with their other armies for a massive attack. And this is part of the whole chess game, the risk board game, that they're playing across Westeros. Now, the thing the Hightower army does have, even though they're separated from the other Green armies, is they have Daeron and his young dragon, Targaryen. And while she is a juvenile, Rhaenyra can't spare any dragons for the Reach front. That she barely sent a tiny one to the Vale of Arryn because they asked for one, but all of their main ones are either in Dragonstone as a deterrent against the Greens attacking with Vhagar, and maybe we can send one or two into the Crownlands. We might send maybe just Caraxes into the Riverlands. But there are logical reasons they set up on why it's like nuclear deterrence. Most of the dragons are concentrated in their capitals, in King's Landing and Dragonstone, in the east. but without dragons in the West, even a tiny juvenile dragon is really useful if your enemy has no dragons and no flying units. So Daeron isn't just another character, though people do like him. He's not just another character or just another dragon rider. He represents an entire new front in the war, his own subplot. So it's not just that Daeron is in, but we're excited for all the associated characters from his storyline that are going to be in this.